Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the monthly economic briefing presented by the Kenan Institute of Private Enterprise at UNC Kenan-Flagler Business School. I'm External Affairs Assistant Director Rob Knapp, and it's great to have you with us this morning. What we don't have with us this morning, new jobs numbers. What we do have with us this morning, or who we have with us, is our Chief Economist, Gerald Cohen, who is going to go through an economic scorecard, maybe look at some indicators, try to get an idea of where this economy is going. He has a lot of other things to talk about too. I was in his office late yesterday afternoon. He has a lot of charts, so I'm going to get through this introduction quickly so that we can let Gerald do his thing. Quick on the rules of the road. Gerald will speak for about 15 to 20 minutes. Then we're going to have time to answer your questions. You can ask those at any time using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you're a member of the media, please let us know that when you ask the question so that we can make sure that that question gets answered. If you are with us by phone this morning, you can ask a question as well. You can email it to me at rob_knapp@kenan-flagler.unc.edu. We will answer as many questions as we can. We will shoot for ending at 9:30. We have a brand new building, Bell Hall, opening on the business campus this morning. I think there are some ceremonies at 10, so we're going to try and get you there on time. So with that, let me introduce our Chief Economist, Gerald Cohen, who is going to tell you everything you need to know. Gerald, good morning. Hope you're doing well.
Good morning, Rob. I don't know about everything you need to know, but I'm going to try to. I'm worried I overpromised in what I was going to talk about, so I'm hopefully going to over deliver. So let me share my screen and start us there and put myself into presentation mode. So hopefully everybody can see me and my presentation. So I just wanted to, it fit to filling the data gap to show that we are still without now 2 months of jobs numbers and actually any economic data or any government economic data except for we did get a September CPI, which I'll talk about. So given that, I can kind of put together some key takeaways. And the first one is that we are driving on a very curvy, meaning uncertain and foggy economic road, because the foggy part is that we don't have data. I like in the Fed or doing any economic policy is that you're actually driving a car looking only in the rearview mirror, because you really don't have any, or you have very little view of what the road ahead looks like. You really only know what the kind of road, the current, maybe an inch ahead or a foot ahead of the current road, and a lot of behind, you can see a lot of what's behind, but we can't even see 2 months of data behind. So we're really, the rear view mirror is even very foggy. What data we have suggests the economy is okay, not great. I also want to we're in the middle or we're at the longest part, or we're now in the longest government shutdown. And I do want to talk about how, very briefly, that the current fiscal policy discussion is really misguided. We need to make hard choices. And this shutdown, as hard as it is, the debate is not really about making these hard choices. Finally, there's a lot of discussion about AI and AI driving the economy, the K-shaped economy. And I'm going to get to illustrate some data that says that that's not true. But if you believe that they are true, then the economy is sitting on a very single, potentially wobbly tent post, which is the equity market. So I'll get to all of these, or let me start. One of the things that my colleague Greg Brown had a really nice scorecard, and I'm trying to one-up him by making it even fancier. So I've basically created this scorecard and looked at the various sectors of the economy and put what data we have since the government shutdown and kind of where it sits, in my opinion. And I'm going to go through the major parts of this: initial jobless claims. I'll talk about the ADP, jobs perception, um, credit card spending, consumer confidence, and then the ISM data that we've had, as well as some of the pricing data. If you think about this, if you weight these equally, then I think where I am is that I'm in the worried, but the economy is not sick part. So I think that we're seeing enough data to suggest the economy is doing okay, but not great. But I really do wish we had that government data. Um, so what data we do have, this is one of the few pieces of public sector data. While the Department of Labor is closed and are not reporting the national jobless claims, and this is where somebody loses their job and then files for unemployment insurance, the states do report it. And so if you sum up the states that have reported and make some assumptions, because the Virgin Islands don't report or aren't reporting, then what we're showing is this orange line, kind of jagged line, suggesting that jobless claims are still quite low, meaning that there aren't a lot of layoffs. I know there have been a lot of layoff announcements, but that has not converted into actual layoffs based on this data. So that's in some respects the most positive sign out there. We're not seeing a lot of layoffs. What we are seeing, and this is if you look at, again, take the sum of the states, the blue line is continuing claims, which are people who, the orange line are people who are filed for the first time, but the blue line are people who are continuing to file. And that data suggests that we're continuing to get this upward swing or upward trend in people who can't find a job, who are filing for continuing claims, and the jobs data that we've had at least through August is consistent with this, that it's people who are really taking a long time, over 15 weeks, over 27 weeks to find a job. So what we're seeing is layoffs are fairly limited, but if you are laid off, it's much harder to find a job. And so that's something to watch very carefully. We have had the private sector. ADP, has been trying to fill the gaps. ADP is the payroll processor. They have a very large sample, and they are trying to kind of replicate the jobs data. And at least if you look at the last two lines, the ADP number suggests, the blue bars, ADP suggests in the month of September, there was a decline. In the month of October, we're seeing an increase. And so, you add the two of them up, or take the 3-month average, and what it suggests are very modest job gains. I've shown the kind of comparable government series, which is in orange. It's private sector employment measured by the government. Last data we have is August. And you can see these numbers don't match. And by the way, ADP tries to match the data up. So they use the government data to kind of match their data. So it's not like these numbers are independent, or the histories are independent of each other. That's all to say that, and I've done work on ADP, and they're constantly trying to upgrade this statistic. The private sector data can't match the government data. And so even though this is helpful to us, it's not the definitive, not definitive in my view. The other employment data that we have, or one of the other pieces, is job postings, courtesy of Indeed. And they are showing this kind of slowing trend. Now, they measure it relative to 2000, the kind of starting in COVID. This is one of the positives of COVID. All this new data came out. And it's a very small positive, but it is a positive as an economist. And so what you're seeing is that job postings are basically back to the level in 2000. And if you compare that to the government data, that suggests that job postings are still relatively healthy. But this kind of downward trend is consistent with all the other pieces of data that I've shown you, or those continuing claims, that it's harder to find a job. Lastly, on the employment report, the consumer confidence measure, the consumer confidence data, one of the questions they ask do you feel it's hard to find a job or easy to find a job? Or they say, is finding a job hard or easy? And if you take the difference between hard minus easy, you can see that this has the red line has a pretty nice relationship. Again, the levels might not be consistent, but the direction is. And so what this data suggests is that the unemployment rate should be rising. It hasn't been, so perhaps there's a broken relationship, and this might be result of the labor force shrinking. But this data is to me on the worrying side because it suggests that it is harder to find those jobs, especially again if you were laid off. Turning to the consumer, which is 2/3 of the economy, so super important to measure. The best data we have at the moment are credit card data. And in some respects, these two lines are telling us the same thing. It's just one, the credit card spending from Opportunity Insights suggests that we're kind of spending continues to rise relative to that COVID level. And so you're seeing this kind of upward trend. And the Visa data suggests that the momentum is about the same. It's not strengthening, maybe it's slightly weakening. And if you try to match these two up and do a little math, they kind of show the same picture. Spending is okay, not great, but still growing. Important to measure spending or how consumers are feeling, although as a lot of people, including myself, say, watch what people do, not what they say. But since we're flying blind or on this foggy road, it's important to look at expectations and or consumer sentiment. And consumer sentiment shows, depending on which measure, things are okay, things are not okay. But both measures, the Michigan and the Conference Board, say that people are dour about the future. And if you're dour about the future, question is how much you will spend. Again, that relationship is not very tight, but it's something to keep. It's worrying. It's on the worrying part to me. And then on the business side, you continue to see the ISM as a survey of purchasing managers. I don't think I've ever reported on this because once we have the employment report, I think this data is not helpful. But since we don't have an employment report, it matches fairly decently with kind of what's happening in the economy. Fairly decently, again, is a key word. But what it's showing is that the service sector continues to grow, the manufacturing sector continues to shrink. Things are okay, but not great. We're not growing as fast as we were in the kind of right after the COVID recovery or right before COVID. But this data suggests that at least the service sector continues to grow. Turning to prices, one of the pieces of data, the only piece of data that government data we've had released, the inflation data is worrying because we're seeing this acceleration in inflation or pickup in inflation. We're not at nowhere near the double-digit levels we saw kind of 3 or 4 years ago, but we are but inflation is picking up, and that's a great concern to the Fed and to people in general who are seeing prices rising. And where you're seeing it is in the goods sector, and that you can relate directly to tariffs. And that is, and as you can see in this history of the blue line, we've generally goods prices adjusting for the quality, and that's important because the price of an iPhone, while the price of the iPhone may be the same as it was 5 years ago, the features that you have or the speed that you have is significantly better. And so the goods prices have basically been flat to down for close to 20 years, and now they're kind of rising again. While service prices they're kind of flat, maybe to slightly edging down. They're still above the kind of pre-COVID levels. So on average, inflation is picking up and above the Fed's 2% target. If you're thinking about, well, where do people think inflation is going? You can see that expectations by households are that inflation will remain elevated, and those household expectations play a role in how people decide to spend and what happens to prices. So if you think that prices are going to rise, you'll kind of spend potentially in advance of that. Or if you're a business and you think prices are going to rise, then you're going to try to jump ahead of that. And the business data is consistent with this kind of a general upward trend in prices. Um, Turning to so all of that in sum, it suggests in my opinion, the economy is okay, but I'm worried about a number of factors: inflation, jobs, job creation, sentiment. So turning to and the impact of policy and the government shutdown and on the economy. So just a quick take on policy. So I think this chart is the illustration of what we should be thinking about, which is that government spending as a share of the economy is expected to continue to rise, and government revenues are expected to be essentially flat. So we're running these deficits. And most of the vast majority or all of the increase is the result of mandatory spending. So spending on Social Security, healthcare. And by the way, this forecast assumes that the ACA subsidies, which is the heart of the debate, are cut. So it's not like, if adding them makes a difference, or adding them just makes the deficit even wider. So the hard choice that we have to make is, are we going to cut spending on healthcare or Social Security, kind of long term, all of the, or are we going to raise revenues because people want that spending? And that's it in a nutshell. Doing that is really hard, and making those decisions is really hard. But this is what the debate should be about, and not about. I mean, ACA subsidies is part of this question, but it should be about a lot more than just ACA subsidies. Turning to this question of AI, how much of the economy is AI? I wanted to kind of so people have been, I've heard numbers: 80% of growth is because of AI, 50% of growth is because of AI. And so I was like, I don't think that is true. So what this chart illustrates is the orange is the impact of AI, IT, hardware and software spending on the economy. If you look at, like, people are talking about data centers, the construction, you're not seeing it much of that in the data. It's not adding a lot. In fact, in some respects, they're showing declines. But so the two big factors that are adding to growth are IT, hardware, and software. And yes, in Q1 and Q2, they were a big driver of growth. In Q2, AI spending accounted for a third of growth. In Q1, because GDP declined, AI spending accounted for over 100%. And so what people may be doing is they're saying, well, if we take the 2 quarters, then it adds to something like over 60%, which is the correct number. But that's just 2 quarters, and one of them had GDP declining because of a big increase in imports in advance of tariffs. And notice how this orange bar is much smaller in 2024, even though AI was a big focus of discussion. The other big part of growth is the consumer, and that's illustrated in green. And you can see that consumer spending dwarfs AI spending in general. And by the way, if you look back to the 1990s, mid to late 1990s, you saw a similar pattern where there were some quarters where IT was a key driver of growth, but the key is in some quarters, and usually those were quarters when the rest of the economy was not doing well, and when the economy was running on all 6 or 8 or however many cylinders you want. IT spending was a meaningful share, but it wasn't all of the economy. So the question is, yes, in Q2, the economy rested a lot on AI and in general on the consumer. And then, so the issue is, how much of that spending will continue on the consumer side and on the AI side? And so one of the things we've seen is that wealth has increased substantially. And this is not the level of wealth. The level of wealth for the US households is about, the net worth is $175 trillion dollars, $175 trillion. But if you measure it relative to the size of the economy or the size of household income, that number is near record levels. So people, if you own your home or have equity, then you are feeling quite flush, and that is helping support spending. The question is it helping support all spending? And my view is no. And is it helping support only wealthy spending? And again, my view is no. And here's why. So this data is not new. The latest data point is 2023. But this is the share of consumer spending for the top 20% of households, the middle 50 to 80, and then the bottom half. The top notice the scales are different, but the top 20% do spend around 40% do account for about 40% of total spending. So they are an important part. But is their share rising? No. In fact, this data suggests their share is falling. So in fact, it's the inverse of the K-shaped economy. If this trend continues, and that's a good question, it suggests that what's driving growth are the lower income households, not higher income households. And people have been talking about the K-shaped economy in 2023, in 2022. So I'm not saying I know definitively that this trend hasn't reversed, but at least the data that we have suggests it's actually the inverse of the K-shaped economy. And then let me get to, I've taken longer than I anticipated, I apologize. This question about if you think that AI is accounting for a lot of the CapEx or most of the CapEx and most of the spending because of the wealth effect, then the question is that a risk? And my belief is yes. So I saw this chart at a presentation a couple of days ago, and it made me blanch. So there are two reasons why it made me blanch. The first is you're comparing apples to oranges. So the orange number or the orange bar is the market cap of the Magnificent Seven. And people are showing, this is a chart that a number of people have been illustrating, saying, look, the market cap is greater than the GDP of the EU. But the GDP is a flow. That's the market cap, that's the GDP in 2025. In 2026, the number will be the same or higher. In 2027, so if you do it on a present discounted value basis, you're comparing a market cap that's 22 trillion for the Magnificent Seven. And if I do some rough math, it's a value of a present discount value of EU GDP of about 400 trillion. So apples to oranges. The second thing about this chart is what the market cap is saying is that the present discounted value of earnings for these seven is 22 trillion. Is that really realistic? I'm not an equity analyst. I lived through the dot-com bubble and watched people have these amazing, I think about pets.com, and I acknowledge that as from an economic standpoint, pets.com was a leading indicator. It was a failed company, but it had technology that we now use, think Chewy. I don't know if people remember the pets.com sock. So go look that up for those of you that don't remember that. But the question is, if you believe that this economy is all about AI, and AI is driving, and then these valuations are driving spending, and if the valuations are driving household consumption, then that is one tent pole that the economy is standing on. And to me, it's a worrying tent pole. So let me stop and open it up to questions, and I apologize for taking too long.
Gerald, that was not too long at all. That was perfect. We appreciate it. In 2022, we said, hey, we're going to do this briefing thing on the morning the jobs numbers come out, and all the economists said, yeah, we'll do that. And now we come back this year and say, okay, we're still going to do it. We just don't have any jobs numbers. And you and Greg have both answered the bell admirably, and we appreciate that show must go on spirit.
Thank you.
So very quickly, let me tell you, if you want to get a question in for Gerald, we will have a little time for that. Use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you are with us by phone, you can email it to me at rob_knapp@kenan-flagler.unc.edu. We will get to as many of them as we can. If you're with a media organization, pop your media organization in there, so we'll make sure we can try to get that one on the air.
And,
Let's
and I'm
see.
happy to go long, but I want to respect people's time. So
Yes, we do not want people to miss the Bell Hall opening ceremonies. So, but yeah, no, much appreciated, Gerald, and I know you've been great about that in the past too. So, okay, here is one from Dan Barkin at Business North Carolina, and he asks, where would you expect to see the impact of the government shutdown in military-based communities like Fayetteville, Jacksonville, Goldsboro? Do past shutdowns provide any history here?
so past shutdowns do provide a history overall, and we have had um, two shutdowns of note, and or at least I know the kind of literature on two shutdowns, and the what used to be the longest in 2019, and then the one in 2013, and both of those show that there was lost economic output, um, that was some that was significant, uh, that and what it came from was people not spending, people not being able to go to national parks, people, and so I can't say for certain. And then also the government workers who ultimately were paid, but they weren't going to coffee shops and the like, and so um, near their offices, and so the question is, I haven't seen anything in particular about military communities, but you can think it's the same. It's apropos. Now, I believe that military is still being paid, although I can't recall if that's stopped now. I think, Rob, you're saying it's stopped. Is that your um, but I know contractors are not being paid, and there are a significant amount of contractors that are on military bases. And the question is, A, their activities, and then B, the knock-on effects. So there's
Okay.
definitely an impact, but I don't have any. I haven't studied in particular military bases.
Okay, great. Thank you. Here's one that ties together a couple of things we talk about, and you mentioned it this time as well. How much do expectations about AI affect consumer confidence?
It's a really good question. I can imagine it. I don't know the answer. I don't know if anybody has been able to actually tease that out, but I can imagine it in a number of ways. Um, One question is this debate, and I'm not gonna weigh in other than maybe I'll do the TLDR version of, is AI gonna take all of our jobs? If you believe that is true, and I don't believe that is true. I think it's much more, history has shown it's not true. But if you believe that's true, then you should be worried. And as two briefings ago, my colleague Cami Cunin illustrated that younger households are more pessimistic than older households, which is the reverse of what normally happens. Now that may have nothing to do with AI, but maybe they're worried about their jobs because of AI. So if you believe that's true, then your expectations of the future make you worried. If, though, you are on the flip side, you're optimistic about AI and productivity, or you look at your stock portfolio and you say, and don't look at it every day, but you look at it and you're like, wow, this AI thing or the stock market's doing great, then I would imagine that people would be more optimistic. So that was a
Okay.
very on the one hand, on the other hand answer.
That's a pretty solid answer for not knowing the answer, perhaps. So as you said up front, so no, that was good. Now you're going to like this one a lot, I think, because you're going to get the chance to design something maybe. Do we need, this is from Kevin Clark, thanks Kevin, do we need new private and consortium data sources to supplement or replace US government only data sources in the past? What would you imagine this would look like and potential advantages for economic situation assessment and decision intelligence?
Oh, thank you, Kevin. I love that question. Yes, we need new data. Um, I do not believe there's been no evidence to date, and I've had experience with this, and I have colleagues who spend a lot of time at hedge funds or friends who spend a lot of time at hedge funds trying to suss out the government data using private sector data, and they've never been able to replicate it. So I don't think that the government data is replicable because the scope, the government does, the private sector doesn't have access to, or it doesn't have the ability to survey as many people or as many businesses as the private sector can't do what the government does in terms of the scope. They also don't have access to the tax data, which fortunately, which is what is the check on most of these. So I don't believe that they're replicable, but yes, if using big data sources, we can, using my analogy of driving in the rearview mirror, we can move that forward part, or maybe that seeing the current road from an inch or a foot to 30 feet or 50 feet. And that's because the best data, real-time data we have is going to come from this big data, from credit card data, from the ADP, they're, seeing what they see on the payrolls that they pay out. So, and from scraping prices from the internet. I should note that the government data, the government statisticians are working to incorporate that into the public sector data. So instead of just surveying, getting data from Walmart on their retail sales, they're supplementing it with the data that they see from online retail sales. So what I would say is big data, or the private sector data is a great supplement, and that if we gave more money to our government statisticians, they could use that incorporate that into the government data and make our data more even better, and lower the amount of revisions, because there's been a lot of discussions. Oh, the data gets revised, it's bad. It's revised because we get new data that, the tax data, which is unless people are, well, we know people are not being completely honest on their taxes, but unless people are being completely dishonest on their taxes, and we know you can't do that because you have, W-2s filed and things like that. But that tax data is the best check we have. And but incorporating real-time data, big data, would be really helpful for the government and for the private sector.
Okay, very good. Very great answer. Thank you. All right, we're going to call this one the last one. You can consider this a lightning round question. This is actually a holdover from last time, but our audience is so great, they ask questions that can be transferred to the next briefing, and you actually had a slide up about this. So it's a question about job postings. Barbara Senich, thank you, Barbara, for the question, had seen an article talking about the idea that companies are inclined, perhaps more so than they used to be, to post jobs that they're really not going to fill. There are some reasons that would offer them benefits in one way or another. Are job postings a less, maybe not as good a bit of data as they used to be?
That's a good question. I think I've seen variants of this question, about jobs postings, in some respects about people applications, because now it's much easier to apply. I think, as in a lot of things, it's complicated to tease out, especially because now we have online job postings. So at least it's easier for us to get to the data, but it's messier for us because maybe there are repeats. And some of the data, some companies will post on 3 different job sites, and so if you're cleaning the data, so this makes cleaning the data harder. But I think this broader question of, are people posting hirings because they need to for administrative reasons, but they're not really looking. Um, I don't know. I don't know if I have I don't know. I don't know if I have a good answer to it. I might have an answer though that says that is probably a cyclical indicator, and if I could get that, that would be great. Because normally people are, if you're I would say when the labor market is tight, is very tight, you're posting jobs because you need to hire people, and when the labor market is loose, you're going to see these phantom job posts. So I'm going to turn it into what I wish I could see, and I wish I could see those phantom job posts because I think it's a great indicator. And Barbara, if I get that data, we'll call it the Senich Cohen jobs or cyclical indicator.
That's, you think of everything. So that's great. We've got this put together now. We're going to call it a briefing. Thank you very much, Gerald Cohen, for covering a lot of ground without any employment number prompts. We appreciate it very much. We appreciate our attendees. We love your questions. They help make this what it is, and we appreciate all that you put into it. So for those of us with the media, we'd love to continue the conversation. If you'd like to talk to Dr. Cohen or any of our other experts about any of these topics that have come up this morning, you can reach out to me, Rob_Knapp at Kenan-Flagler.unc.edu. We're looking forward to hearing from you, from everyone in the audience. Please check out our website at kenaninstitute.unc.edu. I think I mentioned this last time, right after our recent Frontiers of Business conference. We had several new pieces go up in that time. So if you haven't seen them, please take a look. We're going to have some more interesting things coming up toward the end of the year. Gerald, am I allowed to at least say that 5 Trends is on the way back? People will see that again.
It will be, and depending on the level of shutdown, I'll be able to. We'll definitely have new and updated charts and data, but we're hoping that we get some of our benchmark data to help us along. But yes, there will be 5 trends. And I should also note, I think somebody asked a question, could we access the recording somewhere? I think that is available on our website after some time. You can tell me, I don't know if it's later today or tomorrow.
Yes. Yep. We'll have the video of the briefing up today. And if you are registered to attend, you'll get an email later today telling you when that's up, so you can go straight to it. All right. Well, we hope to see you all again. I believe the next date is December 5th. Numbers or no numbers, we're planning on being here. I think Greg Brown will be back with us for that one. So thanks for being with us this morning. We hope to see you next month. Enjoy the rest of your Friday.
Thanks, and I'll see everybody in early January. With or without data, I will have a 5 trends, what to look forward to in 2026. So
that's right. So tune in. Thank you all.
Thanks.